Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily for December 3rd, 2024. Coming up, the Wolves, they press pause on the panic button by beating the Lakers. We've got Lauren Williams from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on to talk about the Hawks, and we love the Hawks on this show. Can't get enough of them. And we're going to do a deep dive on Franz Wagner in our question of the night. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, S.
Morning.
Oh, it was blowout night last night, S.
Yeah.
We had I'm going to call this a cooling off Monday. The Sunday games were so good. We had that amazing Friday night NBA Cup,
you can't win them all.
Slate.
You can't win them all.
You need these off nights because tomorrow night, or tonight, we've got the NBA Cup. The final night of group play, and everything's on the line, as we are constantly reminded by Rosario Dawson in the commercial. It's all on the line. Not all on the line was the Timberwolves season in their game against you like that transition, right? Against the Lakers, because it's early, but the Wolves pulled it out. They're now back to 500. They blew out the Lakers, and we'll talk about the Lakers a little bit. Look, it's just one game, S, and it's against the Lakers, and the Lakers have their own trouble. D'Angelo Russell was back in the starting lineup for him last night because Austin Reeves is out with that injury. But the Wolves took advantage of a poor transition defense team who could not make a shot. And I mean, the Wolves just looked better. They made a lot of shots. The Lakers missed a ton. But this is about the outcome we should expect in this matchup.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to credit the Wolves for not making this more interesting than it had to be honest with you, because they have had a tendency to do that over the last couple of weeks, kind of playing with their food, if you will. Anthony Edwards has called that out a few times. Anthony Davis maybe needs to do some calling out.
maybe somebody should call Anthony Davis out, but we'll get to that.
But I think for the Wolves, this was a feel-good win. You saw Rudy Gobert faking a DHO, getting downhill, laughing his way to the bench. Him and Julius Randle had a moment on the bench. Anthony Edwards didn't even shoot the ball that well tonight, but they got a well-rounded effort from everybody else. Dante DiVincenzo chipped in. And so I just feel like these type of games are maybe not the ones that turn the season around, but just to be able to find an identity early in this season for a Wolves team that is still trying to figure out who they are, this is a good win for them.
Well, and the bench was great, which has been kind of the biggest problem. I mean, the Julius Randle stuff aside, not getting the sort of production they expected out of Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo off the bench has been a huge issue for them. Mike Conley having a really good game. The big run that they went on was Gobert, Conley, and bench guys. And that's the sort of stuff that it takes to be a contender. I mean, the only way you get through an 82-game season is by being able to win some games on the back of your bench. And so, seeing DiVincenzo hit some shots as he has the last few weeks, it makes this feel like, okay, we understand the vision. We understand the fit. I still go back to the Randle stuff. There's huge defensive issues with him out there and Conley especially. I just don't know. I understand the egos involved.
Crazy,
right?
Julius Randle stat is that he has one block this season.
There's an effort issue defensively, right? But with Naz Reid, you actually don't get that. And I know that there's egos involved, but I just don't see how, if you're going to play your best five guys, Naz Reid isn't on the court.
It's tough. And I think they will have to eventually make a decision there. One of the things that's interesting to me about Randle is, I think when the Wolves brought him in, it was the idea of, hey, we will be adding a secondary playmaker to help Anthony Edwards, right? I don't think that's necessarily panned out the way that they've hoped it would. The ball is sticking on offense, and I think that aspect has really made it harder for them to move the ball offensively outside of Randle. Tonight, you mentioned Dante DiVincenzo. One of the key things about him, he had 9 assists. He was moving the ball. His ball handling really opened up the Wolves offense. Between him and Conley, they were doing their thing on the ball handling and playmaking front. So this team is lacking in that area. They didn't have Rob Dillingham tonight, who was out. I think they're just starved for playmaking outside of Anthony Edwards. When a guy like DiVincenzo is playing the way he did tonight, Conley is playing the way he did tonight, it alleviates some of the pressure off of Randle to not be that playmaker that I don't necessarily think he can be on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've hit this note on this show. Yeah, people have been focused. They're missing Karl Anthony Towns or whatever. Kyle Anderson And what he
Playmaker.
did, not only on the defensive end, but also offensive playmaking, just being able to settle the floor down when you needed someone to do it. He's missed greatly. I just don't know where they go and find that guy because they don't grow on trees. Let's swing it to the Lakers. Again, we talked about the Lakers quite a bit. They've had, I would say they've had really good success at winning games this year, but it hasn't been all that impressive. They don't really have a great, offense. The defense is,
it's bad. It's terrible.
What is going on? Anthony Davis sometimes doesn't even cross half court. So that's part of the issue with the transition defense. I just don't understand why no one but Anthony Davis seems to be able to defend anybody in the half court.
They don't have many athletes on that team, man. And I think they have a lot of one-way players, right? You bring in Dalton Connect, boost your offense in a major way, but he's a rookie, still trying to figure out the defensive side of the ball. Austin Reeves has had a great year for them on the offensive end, but he's going to get cooked on that defensive side of the ball. And then you bring in, let's say, a Cam Reddish, right? Not that great of an offensive player, good defensive player. They have a lot of one-way, one-dimensional guys on that roster. I don't think there's necessarily a fix to that. And for what it's worth, we could talk about coaching and maybe implementing better lineups and whatnot. I don't know what else you could do really in this situation.
I'll tell you right now. I mean, they basically have this similar record to what they started with last year.
Yeah.
But this is about the horses in the race, man. You can only draw up so much. But if Cam Reddish is the guy coming off a screen, you can't draw up a better play for Cam Reddish. So it is what it is. And I mean, that being said, like some of the stuff this season has been positive, but I think, man, we might be early to this.
Okay.
We may be early here. And people are starting to chirp a little bit, but I want to ask you, has Father Time caught up to LeBron ahead of his 40th birthday? Because he looks sometimes flat-footed.
Yeah.
Not as forceful. I did a little digging, and look, defensive speed stats, tracking data on NBA.com is not the be all end all. He and Anthony Davis are like two of the slowest defenders in the league as far as like the actual speed that they travel. That's pretty bad. I mean, now LeBron is going to coast on defense, but he doesn't have the juice on the offensive end either. The shot has been great, but it's been he's not as forceful.
He's not able to get downhill the way he used to. And I kind of feel bad saying that about a 40-year-old man, because it's just like, what do we expect out of a guy who's been doing this for 22 years? That being said, yes, Father Time is kind of catching up at this point. And I think that just goes to show you that the Lakers, if they want to still compete this year, if they are looking at this year as a legitimate year to help LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they have to go out and get him some help on the offensive end. He was 4 of 16 tonight from the field, just was not effective getting downhill. The size of the Timberwolves really affected him on the defensive end. He wasn't able to finish around the basket either. And that's concerning for a guy who, for the majority of his career, has been a freight train like that.
Right.
And so I don't know, man. Like, do you think this makes sense for the Lakers to eventually make a trade to upgrade? Are we there yet?
It's the Lakers. We should all be expecting a trade.
Okay,
I'm waiting for all the jersey photoshops to come out.
Right.
We got a little bit of news today. NBA announced their players of the week. Alperen Sengun wins it for the Western Conference. Jalen Brunson wins it in the East. Both of those guys had good weeks, but I think in the West, it's just a little bit more competitive. Number one, Harrison Barnes won it last week.
Crazy.
Just kind of came out of nowhere. But, I was going into this thinking, all right, well, maybe Wemby, because he's had such an incredible week. But, Sengun, they go 3-0, 21 points a game, almost a triple-double.
Yeah.
13 rebounds, 9 assists. Sengun's pretty good.
Sengun is pretty good. I think he's the focal point of everything they do offensively. I was mentioning it on yesterday's episode, but the 1-5 pick and roll between him and Fred VanVleet is just seamless. Like, it's the bread and butter of their offense. And there's so many things that you can do when Sengun is on your roster, right? He is baby Jokic in the sense that he can make plays and make passes. And for what it's worth, I think Sengun has made a massive leap on the defensive end this year. Like, he is competing. He's protecting the rim better. The way that he is working defensively to stay connected within that perimeter defense that we've talked about and how great they are, I think he's a massive part of why the Rockets are one of the best defenses in the league this season. So he deserves it. We could talk about Wemby and how he probably should have been in this conversation, but when the Rockets are rolling like this, man, he needs to be in there. And
also, Wemby's going to win 1 million of these. So
yes,
we'll have plenty of time to sing his praises for Player of the Week.
True.
Guys, stick around. We got Lauren Williams on to talk about the Hawks. We almost cursed them. The Pelicans have no players available, and they somehow almost beat the Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks survived a little bit of a scare from the beat-up Pelicans, and the NBA Daily Curse has finally been broken. We have Lauren Williams from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She covers the Hawks for them. Lauren, welcome, and you're welcome because the Hawks didn't lose, even though we had you coming on the show. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I can't complain. It's always good to cover a team after a win versus a loss. So, yeah, things are looking up for them.
Well, okay, so the Hawks were one of my teams to watch coming into the year. I just really like their pieces. I think they've got just a better fit without DeJounte Murray out there. Just the pieces look like they look better around Trey. I want to ask you, you know this team better than anybody. Your expectations coming into the year versus where we're at now, how far apart are they?
Yeah, I think when I looked at the season, saw some of the changes that were made to the East, I kind of had the Hawks ceiling at about a 7 or 8. Being a play-in team again, especially because they're so young. You look at some of their core pieces in Jalen Johnson, Zachary Risachet, Dyson Daniels, those 3 in the starting lineup. Their average age is probably about, 21, 22? Yeah. And then you have a guy like Trae Young who's still under the age of 27. So they're a really young team. So I didn't expect that, they had a very particularly high ceiling beyond the play-in tournament. But right now, with the 4-game win streak that they're on, they might mess around and make it to the playoffs, maybe be that 6th or 5th seed. We've seen weirder things happen in the NBA, but just looking at how things have shaken out in the Eastern Conference with where Philly is, they're 4-14, I believe. You see teams like Milwaukee just now starting to kind of get their groove and they're making their way up. Cleveland kind of came out and surprised everyone, and they're the number 1 team in the East.
Yeah.
So anything can happen in the NBA, particularly in the Eastern Conference when things are just so uncertain.
We usually say right bad now, here. Doing really well.
Yeah, well, you could say bad. It's a bad Eastern Conference. It's all good.
It is pretty bad. But yeah, I think they're doing a lot better than a lot of people expected them to.
That's true. And I think a big part, I'd love to get your opinion on the vibes of this team too, because it felt like last season, the vibes were a little off. And this year, you bring in Dyson Daniels, they're making the great nickname with the Great Barrier Reef, like just an incredible nickname. Larry Nance has come in and been like a big vet for everybody on the team. Yep. What's the vibes difference like between last year's team and this year's?
I hate to say it's a bit more kumbaya than last year, but it really is a bit more kumbaya than last year. I think I've noticed a lot of these guys really getting along with each other. There's a lot of respect in the locker room. They're all playing for each other. And I think particularly now that everyone's healthy, the outlook is a lot better. Right. They all thought that they would be a better team when they got some key pieces in Bogdan Bogdanovic back and DeAndre Hunter. We've seen how he's kind of really taken off. He's hitting shots very efficiently. I think in like 7 of his last 11 games, he's shooting over 50% from the floor, hitting over like 40% of his shots from 3 in a few of those games. So I think the fact that he's been a huge spark plug off the bench, he's making a case to be a 6th man of the year. The vibes are great. I think when guys are hitting shots, guys are winning, things are a lot easier. And when you win 4 straight, the vibes are going to be really, really high. But even when they were in that weird losing streak, when guys were injured, it was a very positive atmosphere. I think they kind of took expectations off of themselves and they just wanted to go out there. They just wanted to play for each other. And I think that's a huge key with this team is the unselfishness. And that's really kind of shown through from top of the lineup all the way down to the bottom. Everybody's kind of playing for each other.
That's a perfect segue to Trae Young. Because he's the big concern, right? I mean, he's the top dog there, the heliocentric offense, and they have lived by Trae Young and they have died numerous deaths by Trae Young, right? So on the offensive end, when he's hitting shots, things look good. This year's been a little bit different. When he's not making shots, they've managed to still score. I mean, what's the difference there? Is it just guys making shots, or is there a different scheme happening?
I think the big thing, it starts with guys making shots, but I think a big focus has also been that Trey hasn't been, especially recently with so many guys coming back into the rotation, the main scorer. They've got a guy like Jalen Johnson who can go out and get you 19 points a night. I think
have that crazy dunk that he had tonight, by the way.
Exactly, with the left hand. Yeah. I think the rise of him kind of takes some of the pressure off of Trey to be that big scoring, this big offensive option. I think obviously when Jalen can get downhill, play fast, get things out in transition, as we've seen him do, he's also taking on a thing of being a guy who can set guys up for plays. I think that's a huge thing. Because last year, a lot of it kind of fell on Trey, and that took a lot of pressure. I mean, you also had DeJounte Murray, of course, but they're both different players. And I think Jalen being kind of a bigger guy also helps them out. It doesn't make it easy for defenses to kind of break some of those playmaking options down. And we're seeing him find his teammate like Onyeka Okongwu. We've seen find DeAndre Hunter in the corner for that big three tonight over DeJounte Murray. So I think that's a big thing, is that they're playing off the pass more. And when you have guys really willing to share the ball, and Trey being a guy who can draw defenses away from the play, that will open things up for everybody else, that also contributes to a lot of those guys having more assists. But we saw Trey have 15 assists tonight. He had 22 in that first win over Cleveland, over his career high. So I think this is just the fact that they're playing unselfishly. And a big part of that is Trey trusting his teammates more to not only score, but to make plays for each other. I think that's kind of huge.
Helps with the vibes too, right? Like, I mean, when everybody's happy, sharing the sugar, a pass, an assist makes two guys happy, not just one, you got a lot of that going on.
And Trey actually had a very funny quote the other day. Well, maybe not necessarily funny, but intriguing quote maybe, is that if hockey assists were a stat that the NBA tracked, he was like, I would probably have 20 a night.
He would.
And that's true. I mean, just the way that he's able to impact plays and get guys open to make the right pass is a huge thing that doesn't show up on the box score.
Lauren, this is one of the youngest teams in the league. You mentioned already, but they are also one of the monster slayers, beating Cleveland, beating Boston. They've got this NBA Cup opportunity. Mm-hmm. How important is that for them to, I guess, get a notch under the belt, especially early on in this season?
It's giving guys who, you may not have expected to be competing for something to compete for, especially when I talked about the expectations that people had for this team at the beginning of the season. They just didn't really expect them to be in the mix of things, but they really are. And I think this NBA Cup, for all of its faults, it really does up the ante for a lot of these players, especially guys who may not necessarily get the shine that they deserve. And so I think the fact that, again, we're seeing a guy like Jalen Johnson kind of take the mantle up and affect plays in not just a scoring way, but creating opportunities, and then also just him on the defensive end. I think he's got some room for improvement there, but I really do think he's kind of growing into a better defensive player. And I think the more that you give guys a chance to compete for something beyond just the regular season or beyond an appearance in the playoffs, it's going to kind of up the ante a little bit. I said that already.
For sure. Yeah.
It's really going to up the intensity. And I think they pride themselves on having another title. I don't think, they're going to be like the Lakers and hand them raise an NBA Cup.
Hey, listen, the NBA Cup means more, Lauren, around here.
If they don't raise a banner, I will be disappointed.
I think it's probably in the CBA or somewhere. Yes. Like they have to do it. All right, before you have to go, okay.
Yeah.
This season, look, it's too early to call it a success or anything. It's been good so far. What does a successful season look like for this team? And then what does it mean for them going forward? This is not a title team. They're probably not a top 4 team. But if they're in that top 6, if they advance maybe from the play-in into the playoffs, get into a playoff series, that's a successful season in my book.
Yeah.
So what does it look like to you?
I think you hit the nail on the head, but I also think the big thing, even if they don't necessarily make it out of the play-in, if they are a play-in team, I think the big thing is just how have these guys developed over the course of the season, particularly the young guys. I mean, I named a lot of them already. Dyson Daniels, whether to me, if they can unlock a little bit more of his offense and maybe we start seeing that outside shot falling a little bit more consistently, the continued rise of Zachary Risache. I mean, I tweeted it out that there's so many passes that he's able to make that are highlight worthy that they just don't quite convert. But those are going to eventually start falling for those guys. You see Trey his stock starts to fall a little bit more. I'm really interested to see, this experiment that they have going on with Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu and what the future for them looks like. Obviously, they have Larry Nance in there. But I think the big thing is just if we can continue to see from the start of the season till the end a clear path or a clear rise of all of these guys where maybe they're in the conversation more. That to me looks like a successful season for this team, just because I think coming into the year, the expectation was for them to just be competitive and for them to grow. And obviously there are different metrics for that. But I think if you're seeing them compete night in and night out, you never want to see moral victories necessarily. But if those losses are quote unquote competitive losses, I think that's still going to be a huge sign that this team is growing in the right direction.
Yeah, anytime you trade away a guy like DeJounte Murray, you've got a spotlight on you. I think so far, they've been shining pretty bright. It's been pretty fun.
I didn't think they would be a good team, but I always thought that they would be a fun team, and I think we're seeing a little bit more of that fun right now.
And that's what matters. It's called honorably bad. Shout out to Keith Parrish. Shout out to Lauren Williams. Lauren Williams, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Go and read her stuff. It literally covers the Hawks better than anybody. Guys, stick around after the break. S and I, we're going to talk about this leap that Franz Wagner's taking right now. And we're back for another round of listener question. Remember, guys, over at theathletic.com, we've got the post. We've got it in the show notes. Go and leave us a question. We're going to be checking that thing every single day. We're just going to keep it running. And we'll post every couple weeks or whatever with a new link. But guys, give us your questions. We're really appreciating them. Marino C asked us, and we do like Franz Wagner around here.
Yep.
Did anyone really see Franz taking this kind of leap? When was the last time an elite complementary player was really a sleeping alpha? Now, as much as I don't like the term alpha,
I'm not a fan
of that. We'll say we like the term number one. Okay. And I will also say, let's pump the brakes just a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know if Franz is really a number one, but he certainly looks like a good number two if Paolo is your number one. I think he is. That's going to be the pecking order when he comes back. But that's an interesting question, right? Like Paolo goes out.
Yep. We
say, it's over for them. Franz just steps right into that role, takes over, and they haven't missed a beat. They're the 3 seed in the East. Yes. Does this ring any bells? Has this happened anytime you can think of?
There's a couple that remind me of this. The Paul George Indiana Pacer days where he was just kind of like a role player initially to Danny Granger.
Right?
And then he stepped in and Paul George was, he became the all-star, the superstar that competed against LeBron in the Heat. Another one is Derrick Rose went down with that injury and Jimmy Butler became the most improved player and quote unquote alpha, if you will, number one option of that team. Those are the two that jump out to me. And especially because they were guys who were like sort of in Franz's position, like wing types, some shooting questions to them earlier in their careers, and then they turned it around as shooters and shot creators. So you're seeing some of the similar things that Franz is excelling at right now. The 3-point shot has got better with him, but I really am interested because I think people will immediately talk about the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown of it all with Paolo and Franz, right? The combination of like two young guys, two guys who play similar positions, need the ball in their hands. Do they need the ball in their hands? How do they work together? And the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum comparison, like they worked out very, very well. Like they won a championship together, even despite the should they break them up questions. Yeah. They worked out incredibly well, turned into all-stars, and one of them won a finals MVP, right? Mm-hmm. How is that going to work when Paolo comes back is my question with the Magic, right? How do you? It's
a good question, right? Like, because I think when we think of complementary players, it's much more clear when it's like a small and a big. If you have, if you had Steph Curry and you had Giannis, it's like, oh, well, I see how they worked. Or Dame and Giannis, for instance. We knew what that was going to look like. I would even argue the Jaylen Brown, Tatum comp is perfect.
Is better.
In that they do not directly work together in conventional basketball sense. It's more of a your turn, my turn at an elite level, potentially. But with that being said, I mean, both of these guys, I think, are going to be willing screeners. So, like, they should be able to play off each other in pick and roll.
Yeah.
But having two guys now that and let's throw Jalen Suggs in there. Three guys that okay, he can get us a bucket in the half court. That's two extra guys that they didn't have last year.
It's a good problem
for a team that made the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that what are some fit concerns that you would be worried about now that we've got this sample size of Franz?
Well, Franz and Paolo are both great playmakers, in my opinion. Like, they can
on the ball, though,
on the ball. Yeah. They can manipulate the defense. Like, Paolo is great in the high post area where he's making plays out of delay actions. And Franz is like a drive, bully ball, drive and kick type guy, which theoretically, again, could make a lot of sense together. But it's usually, okay, Paolo has the ball initially in the post, swing it to Franz, swing, drive and kick, and that fuels the offense. Does that remind you of someone?
Exactly.
That reminds me of the Tatum Brown connection that is really, really good in Boston. So there's something there, but it requires a buy-in from both of those guys. It requires like both of them being okay with divvying things up offensively and making things work. That's my main concern is, will both guys be okay having to sacrifice some of the offensive usage?
Yeah, and I did restrain myself and not mention Steph Curry stepping in for Monte Ellis as one of these
there's
alpha
a lot
guys.
Of these.
I mean,
there's James Harden.
This is how it works, right? Like, this is how it's supposed to work, where if a guy goes down, I mean, especially now, man, the NBA guys are so talented. You have players who are, two-way guys putting up 30 a game, 30 points in a game randomly for the Nets. It's a good problem to have around the league.
I will say it is rare for a team like the Orlando Magic, how young they are, to be as good defensively as they are. And part of that is
Jamal Mosley.
Yep.
Jamal Mosley, he should be in every conversation when we're talking about best defensive coaches in the league. He should be in it. That's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thank you guys for tuning in. For S. Baraheni, I am Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.